Hi everyone. So thanks for coming to our first ever PAM Northern Chapter mini design series. Joining us today is architect Cheng Sao In and architect CHOO POO Liang. Okay. First things first, let's get some ground rules set up. So for those of you who are here, we have our signing code on display right now. Please note them down and please fill out the questionnaire form right after the whole event is over. Yeah, we'll have the sign up code right after as well. So we'll get right to it. We don't want to drag the event for too long. Joining us today is our chairman, architect KC Liao. So we'll get things started. So chairman, would you give a short opening speech?
Hi, a very good afternoon to all. I hope everybody's well and safe. Thank you very much for attending, for those who are attending. On behalf of PAM Northern Chapter, I welcome everybody to the webinar. I know it's 5 o'clock on a Friday evening, so maybe you're trying to go out for a drink or something rather than, okay, but for those who are attending, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the following parties for the webinar, not least PAM Northern Chapter Committee led by architect Ao Hui Fang, who organized it, and architect Daniel Chung, who actually, I think, picked the speakers for this webinar. And for, not least, our ever-efficient PAM Northern Chapter Secretariat, Pat and gang. And also thank Garris PXL Co for hosting the event. And of course, Mr. Noah Fendi for moderating the webinar. I also obviously need to thank the speaker, architect Chin and architect Chu, for taking your time off and sharing with us your work and philosophy on a particular subject. And last but not least, our sponsor, GCP Applied Technology. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's only one sponsor, right? So I don't miss them out. Okay. I'm going to kind of ad hoc a little bit, ad-lib a little bit, in fact, introducing two architects. I'm on behalf of PAM, I'm quite excited to see young faces, young, energetic, and dynamic architects. You know, I've seen a little bit of the work that you presented, I think, yesterday during our kind of trial run, and it's really exciting, you know, to see new ideas and kind of coming from young architects. The future is yours now, basically. I think, you know, I don't want to say too much about the work because I'll let you guys present. Just to say that we are very grateful to have young and energetic architects from the Northern Chapter and our own region to share their work with us. I think without further ado, I'll hand it back to you, Fendi. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. So thanks again. So next in our schema, our agenda today, right, is we'll invite our sponsors in. We have up Mr. Steve Wong from GCP. Again, we would like to thank you for sponsoring our session today. So Mr. Steve Wong, maybe you can give us a bit of a sharing about what you do, where you're from. We can share with all the attendees here for a short bit.
Okay.
And hand it over to you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, FND. So maybe I'll start off with just sharing my screen at this moment. Okay. I'll do a very fast and quick one because I'm Steve Wong from GCP, representing GCP Applied Technologies Malaysia, Sdn Bhd. So this is actually a good opportunity for us to sponsoring this webinar series for the PAM Northern Chapter. So with me also, my colleagues is also joining. Miss Jin Eng, she is also doing those specification work to you guys. So without further ado, I will start off with my presentation of our company introduction, very brief introduction. So we actually founded in 1854. Last time we are called W.R. Grace. And then on 2016, we actually changed our name to GCP Applied Technologies. So our CEO is actually Mr. Simon Bates. We are headquartered in Cambridge, and then we will change to a new HQ, bigger facility in Atlanta in 2022. For 2019, our worldwide sales is USD 1 billion. So we have more than 130 plants and offices all over the globe, and over 6,000 employees and operation in over 40 countries. So in 2021, we are celebrating 167 years. And of course, in Malaysia, we already at 48 years now. So this will be our global footprint around the construction market in the world. So actually, I just do a brief one on our global products. So you can see from here, all these products name is actually coming from our GCP own manufacturing item. So we have the pre-proof is our pre-applied membrane, butadiene is our post-applied membrane, mostly for waterproofing, and then seal core is our liquid applied waterproofing. Of course, we also have fireproofing, which is called monocoat. And then we have this sterling-rod. Sterling-rod is a bridge deck waterproofing, which mostly we are talking with those architectural or consultancy for the bridge deck waterproofing. And then we have this Grace Ice and Water Shield is an underlayment, which is mostly used for the roof underlayment. Kawara is our moisture barrier for floor. Then Perma barrier is our air barrier system, which is normally we use it for the cold room area. Denif and BTEX is all the repair method for the cementages and those injection series. So in our GCP, we actually have a lot of high-end, all these certified by our third-party, those certification by all these BBA, CE, FFL, STM, all this range. So we are actually very familiar and have very good experience on those turnkey basement tunneling projects. Of course, all our product meet all the international waterproofing standards. Then this will be our waterproofing series solutions. So mostly we are talking about our pre-applied membrane, which is our pre-proof. Then we have a cell-adhesive membrane, which is called butadiene. Seal core is our liquid applied waterproofing. Either is using machine to do the spraying or just hand applied. So BTEX Flex is our flexible cementitious membrane. Mostly we use it for toilet. Then AdProof and BTEC M5 is actually a mixture for the either in a hydrophobic system or is a crystallization system. Then for the Aquila is mostly we use it for deep basement where they have the D-wall area where they need to do a lot of waterproofing before they do the skin wall on the other side. So this overview of our complete building system, because this one I think I won't be elaborate much because this will take a lot of the time. So I just show you some of the diagram that is which our GCP mostly we do the proposal to the architect and consultants together. So for the pre-proof, okay, so you can see from the pictures here, this is one of our project reference is in KL Tun Razak Exchange. So this pre-proof is actually a pre-applied membrane. That means it's actually bonded upwards to your concrete. It's not bonded backwards. So it's a very patented product, which is by our GCP, by our R&D team, because we have actually done this product more than 60 million meters square in globally and more than 25 years of track record. Then the other one is a post-applied membrane. This is actually is a old conventional method of using those post-applied membrane. Mostly we use this product for those retaining wall area or those lift pit wall area because we already developed the pre-proof. So this will be the complementary on the wall area. So seal core applied, which is very nowadays is quite popular because we are using the liquid applied, which is seamless without any joinings. And then, of course, this will be the selector guide for you to know that which area should use which product, which we can actually help you to do the proposals later on. Then this is our admixture. This is called M5 is our crystallization admixture. AdProof Happy3 is our hydrophobic admixture. Mostly we use those into the concrete before you do the concrete casting as such. Then, of course, the common one is the flexible cementitious membrane, which is we use it for swimming pool area, toilet, those are kitchen area. So it's mostly for interior. Then just now I have mentioned, this is only talking about on the wall area where a lot of basement D wall that are protruded rebars. Then, of course, this is our range of fireproofing system. This fireproofing system, we have a lot of series. So we have to actually have the bomber certified, and then we have the green label certified also. Then the stirring rod is mostly talking about bridge deck waterproofing, as I just now mentioned. Grace Ice Water Shield is a underlayment membrane. And then mostly, I think I've done my project. Then I just want to talk about some case study, a very fast one. So this ongoing project that we are doing in Penang, this will be the Penang waterfront. This is our pre-proof plus membrane. Right. Then the other one is Highland Hospital. We are actually doing the tunneling and the new extension. Then for the TRX projects, we're also doing using our pre-proof membrane and others seal core series. So just to show you some of the picture, this is the newest project we get from the KLCC lot LMN. So this is actually, we do the pre-proof membrane and the fireproofing. This is the actual photo. Okay, so mostly this is what we have done for the projects. Mostly we are doing a lot of commercial and residential. And this is nearby also in Penang, Batukawan, Lam Research. We just finished. So we just show you some of our project reference. So if let's say you all need anything further inquiry on our product, do contact us. And then I'll pass back to you, FND. I think I'll just finish my briefing on our company introduction. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Mr. Steve, for your sharing session. Hopefully everyone keeps you guys in mind for any issues that they have coming up, right? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So thank you again, and thank you again for sponsoring the event. So our next speaker is architect. Our first speaker of the day is going to be architect Chen Sao In. Right, that's right. Hopefully I don't butcher your name so hard. Sorry if I do. Right, so we have architect Chen Sao In, Penang born, just like you and me as well. Hopefully, most of us here are, right. So he was graduated from University of Malaysia, right, in 2018. For those of you who still remember, he actually received the PAM award from the Malaysian Institute of Architects for his Aliati workspace. So for those of you who want to see how that turned out, I mean, the internet's right there, so you can just have a look, and maybe he'll share with us some parts of his project there as well. So he's also participating in a lot of with students, right? You do a lot of input with students as well as continuing to attend as a design critic for several local universities as well. So we'll get straight to it. So architect Chen Sao In, I'll hand the ball over to you.
Thank you, Afendi. I will share the screen. If you're able to see. If you're able to see the slide. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the invitation from PAM Northern Chapter and the kind words from architect Casey Liu and architect Daniel for putting everyone together and everyone in the PAM Northern Chapter and GCP too. I have given a small lecture titled Memory in September 2020 for non-school online discourse. Today, I would like to share some thoughts that grow from that lecture about discovery of things that is always have been there, but I came to understand only how important they are when the time passes. There are basically some ideas about details, and I will share in 4 parts. First on the object, second on the human, and building and place. On the object. 4 years ago, I was invited to work with some young talented artists for art exhibition in New Taipei, Taiwan. My role was to design a section of the exhibition for 2 young local artists. One of them is Hazen Chen. Hazen worked in an old family-run art bookstore in the city center of Taipei. And one day she noticed a dead bird in front of the store after hitting on the glass in the bookstore. While clearing the body, she decided to do something to give the bird another life. So she also collected dry plants in the garden at the back of her home, and also keeping old stationery and things that she found interesting from her parent and grandparents. The piece that you see here is the composition of all these objects that she has been collected. For the exhibition, I have to design from Malaysia, while the works of fabrication was carried out in Taiwan. So I was looking for a material that is familiar with both places. And later I found that plywood, like here and there in Taiwan, also come in a modular size. Plywood is a recycled material. It still has the texture of and grain of the wood, just like a memory of a tree. So I designed a simple stand, 2 plywood that join together in an A-frame and hold and stabilized by a metal rod at the middle, and the same rod extended out to become a support for glass casings that keeping the art piece that on both sides. And this system is balanced on its own. And the plywood that we use, we try to keep its original size, which is 4x8, and certain sections, we actually cut it into half in triangular shapes to lighten the loads of the plywood. And the joint between the 2 plywoods are using the hinge and not a joint or anything new that you will damage the plywood. The plywood then becomes the backdrop to pin up the things that Hazen researched and also inspire along the process of the work. The stand, because they were flexible, they can be recycled, and later after the exhibition, she used it in her bookstore that she's been running. This is a cross-section of the plywood and the metal rod and the glass casing. The research work behind the artwork. The plywood that's cut into half so that the other half could use on the other side of the exhibit. On the right-hand side is the Hazen exhibition. The left side is another collection of metal artworks by another artist called Nan Yuyang. This is Yuyang workshop, where he works on different types of metal using different types of technique and tool. He also explores different types of welding to the metal, and because of different temperature required for the melting point for copper, aluminum, and metal. So he's very, very detailed in how the metals are joined together. The metal members in the exhibition is also fabricated and crafted by Yuyang. And from different samples and also mock-ups in his workshop, we managed to retrieve 4 groups of artworks to use in the exhibition. Clockwise from the top, the cylinder wave series, we call it, the cloud, the book, and the bow. The display of Yuyang artworks were placed on the horizontal plywood, supported by 4 rods that goes all the way down to the floor of the exhibition room. The plywood is then elevated up from the floor. So when after the exhibition, the hands actually can go down between the gap between the plywood and the floor to release the nut and remove the plywood and the metal rod. And the cylinder wave series is actually placed on top of a very thin metal rod that goes all the way down also to the floor and holds stable by the plywood. And the way of placing the cylinder artworks onto the plate is only through 2 struts on the side. So there's no glue and no nail to the artworks. The bow on the right, as you can see, they are just placed on a plywood timber box. And the box is also laid just on top of the plywood panel without having to put any glue, but stabilized by the weight itself. some of the tools and accessories that Yu Yang used are placed on part of the exhibit, so viewers could understand and relate the process of making. His workshop table is also part of the exhibition. Throughout the whole process of the design of this exhibition, I try to minimize the use of glue or nail onto the plywood to prevent them from being damaged, because when after the exhibition, if you have any nails, to remove the plywood, it will damage and the plywood cannot be recycled anymore. So the use of type of methods of joining different materials together become very crucial in the design process. Second part is on the human. For most of us, working has taken up almost 50% or more of our time. And since Industrial Revolution, there have been extensive research on how we should work and to work productively. Like in this picture, you can see the office is arranged in such a way that there are row and row of tables, and the size of tables are all the same, assuming every individuals are working in the same manner, even though if you notice the size of the clothes and the way how it's dressed is differently. This is an interesting book by Susan Cain in 2012. In this book, through her research and findings, that at least 1/3 of the people we know around us are actually introverts. And they are the ones who actually innovate and create, just like Rosa Parks behind Martin Luther King movement and Steve Wozniak behind Apple of Steve Jobs. So in scale to 10, we have people who are introverts, between introverts and extroverts. So there are diversities of people in the working environment. I was given a chance to design an office of 2,000 square feet, and this is the floor plan. If I were to put the workstation in a common manner, the workstation could go up to a number of 12 units. Instead of putting the tables in a regular form, I try to see the potential of the office plan layout if they could create a different, smaller environment within this big environment to cater for different people. So the final result of the office is a clusters of different type of working station setting. At B, you can see there's a round table that for people who prefer to work in a free form without constraint by a rectangle table that restrict on your direction of facing. So on the round table, he can swivel around at any corners he likes. At A, there is a pair of tables. So for people who like to work in a couple, small group, but not in a very big group, they can choose on this layout. For C and the other side of the A, they are bigger group where people who can work in 3 or 4 or maybe even more people at one group. And this is the mezzanine floor. This is the detail of the round table. The round tables and the lightings from the top. The design of some of the furniture in the room also designed in such a way it could create a multi-purpose use. For example, like this shelf, the shapes are tapering outward so that at the moment now, when the office have less people, they can use it as a shelf for filing. And when they need more workstation, because of the tapering, the shelves at the bottom can convert to become a workstation. So it's a very versatile structure that can use as the table and also a shelf. I have also designed some lightings to provide a uniform lightings throughout the space, and also lightings that become part of the structures of the table, so that you have a uniform lighting throughout the space, and also individual lighting on each table that you can adjust for everyone who prefer to be lighter or dimmer when they work. So the top are the general lighting, and the bottoms are the individual lightings at every table. The lightings also, the support of the lightings also become part of the structure of the table. And for the meeting table, they are actually supported by a row of cross timber, hold in position by a metal rod with bow and nut, and screw to the plywood on top for lateral stability. This is the side view. This is the view of the bow and nut, and also the screw on the top. So the whole table could be dismantled and flat packed to the other side. The second office I have the chance to design is bigger. They are about 6,000 square feet. It's located on an office block built in the 80s. Although it's a typical floor plan, but because it's at level 3, certain corners of the office are actually facing the crown of the tree on the outside. On the right-hand side, as you can see, the trees that are growing from the ground becomes the backdrop of the office at the higher level. And as I look into it closely, a different section of the office actually have different views and vegetation outside. And the level of lightings are also different. So the layout eventually is designed in such a way that everyone, almost everyone in the office will have a view to the green outside. On the left, the green highlight is the open working area. And on the right, there are rooms with the windows that are also looking out. And in between the workstations, there are open shelves that's supported by threaded metal rod, and also commonly used in the hanging ceiling services that you normally see. And these open shelves, when they are filled up with folders, they become a natural screen between the workstations. So everyone in the office can choose to have the degree of privacy they would like to have in between their workstation. In the top right, a pocket of space is also carved out with small tables and also chairs and benches together with landscape. This corner became a getaway for lunch and also for informal discussion, and a cozy place for reading, and also in case you need to answer some private call. Next to it is the meeting room. And the meeting rooms and the pocket space are separated not by wall, but big sliding door. So they can be used, these two spaces can be used differently or at once simultaneously. The pantry, which originally tucked away behind the lift core, is shifted to the center closer to the meeting room, and also to the pocket space. So these three elements that can work as one together. There is no reception counter in the office. The cabinet of the pantry is designed carefully so that they become the backdrop of the lobby and also the entrance. On the left, top is the pocket space. Below is the meeting room. On the right of them is the pantry. This is the pocket space with the landscape inside and outside. The meeting rooms that open up to the pocket space. The cabinet of the pantries that placed in such a way that it provides screening and open at the same time. It becomes the wall and a layering of experience as you move across the space. And the cabinet also becomes part of the lobby. From human to building. This is an old map of Malacca. The town has flourished as a trading port. And it has actually become a heritage city together with Georgetown of Penang Islands. And both of these cities, if you notice, they're actually growing organically over time with structures that build over according to the needs of the community. A book by architect and historian Tan Yao Wei documents the buildings in the old cities. He documents the evolution of the styles of the buildings from the 18th century when they are in a simple form and also structure during the early settlements of the cities. And following the mass immigrations of Chinese laborers during the war to work in European colonies in Southeast Asia, the building technologies and materials and cultures from Southern China are introduced to the town slowly to become our existing shophouses. The Malacca, Penang, Singapore becomes the Strait of Settlements of East India Company under British colonies. And people are starting to coming from various parts of the world and creating a diverse range of cultures to the building. And the architectural language started to flourish in 1930s. Art Deco until in 1930s, when Art Deco and international styles comes in. And when all the language of the decorative elements are stripped off and start to back to its simple form. So if we look closely in the book of Yao Wei, this shophouse is designed in such a way that it responds to the climate. By the way, how the roof tiles that been used, the lime plaster instead of cement, and every element that they are designed in such a way they are actually sustainable and healthy materials. So the shophouse is actually a green building by itself, even the terms of greens are invented. This is a satellite view of Malacca. And if you look closely, the pinhole on the terracotta colors of the roof are actually the air well or the courtyard for the shophouses. The royal press that I was asked to design is actually one of the oldest surviving polyglot letterpress printing house in the world. So there are two sections. The first section and the second section of the building are built on the different times, and is located at the core zone of Malacca, where the strictest guidelines of conservation are applied. So instead of focusing on conservation or design on the facade or the style or the material, we decide to look at the structure, the DNA of the building. By retrieving back the old courtyard that was once covered and creating new courtyard in the buildings to encourage cross ventilation. Especially if you look at the section at the bottom on the left, originally it was a covered area, but during the new intervention, we open it up with an air well so that the cross ventilation would not stop at the middle section of the building, but go all the way to the back and create a whole circulation of air. Not just cross ventilation, by opening up the courtyard, it brings natural life to the building. And this pocket of openings pinhole into the building blocks later become the key of the design, where we create different landscape elements so you experience the indoor and outdoor as walk through the exhibit. On the upper floor, the front section of the building is joined to the back of the building where the composing room is. The composing room is the area where the lead for using in the letterpress are placed. So we create a bridge that's connecting on the old floor or first floor at the front section to the back, and the bridge also becoming a viewing platform towards the composing room. This is the courtyard that once was covered and been opened up. This is the big courtyard or the airwell that previously was a floor and covered, but we open it up. The bridge and also the viewing platform that allows the visitors to look at the letterpress. These are the exhibits of the labs. And if you remember, between the front and the rear section of the building, if you look closely at the orange color, there is a small courtyard that split up the connection of the first floor between an open terrace and also and the viewing platform in the composing area in the section. So there's two different levels of building that is built at different time and era, which we need to reconcile. To join them up, we require a bridge that which also function as a small staircase and landing. If I can share with you a video, if we use just a simple metal plate, the structural integrities of this bridge will be compromised. So in order to strengthen the metal plate, the usual way is to provide a metal beam or stringer at the bottom And depending on the size of the stringer, you might require a column at the point when the steps turn to become a landing. And then on top of the staircase, you require a railing. But due to the limitation of the tight, very tight courtyard, and we're trying to maximize the openness of the courtyard, I designed a piece of metal that folded together with the step and also the landing, and at the same time become the bridge that connecting the two different levels of the spaces. This is the construction of that metal. The railing of the bridge is also the beam and the support that reinforce the flimsiness of the metal. That's the final look of the bridge. From the bottom of the bridge. Last one is about a place. This is actually my studio. It's actually an old neighborhood next to a hill. It's one of the last green lung that sits on the borderline between the city and the suburb. And in front of the house, there are some trees. As I stay longer, I realize the trees, they are not just shielding the view from the street to give privacy, but they are also planted at west-facing side to block the sun. So during the evening, the room at the front can still stay cool throughout the night. Besides, it becomes the shade and the canopy for the entrance. And they are not just any tree. They are actually a moraya, that the branches, this is the location of the trees. And the moraya trees, the branches are in a way that is easily to be trimmed. So you can actually alter the canopy of the trees. And in this image, you can see it becomes a cover for a porch of the car. The branches of moraya trees. And when the trees blooms, they bloom with white flower like a snow falling. And the trees are not just at the front, they actually extended all the way outside of the boundary. It makes the lot feels much bigger. And later I realized outside of the boundary, they are actually a drain reserve which built during colonial times that connects from the hill to all the way of the neighborhood. If you can see from this satellite view, the fringes of the tree that go into neighborhood are actually the drain reserve. So they become a backdrop, a green backdrop for the house. At the same time, also an infrastructure to carry the waters from the hill to the lake on the left-hand side, the retention pond. Lastly is a small project something that I came to realize during this ongoing pandemic. It's a project which completed about 10 years ago. A design for a beverage shops that mostly located in shopping mall and some retail shops. If you notice in shopping mall, every restaurant or cafe needs to renovate in every few years for maintenance reasons and also to keep up with the trend. And during every year of this major overhaul, the major items that normally will be renovated are the counters of the shops. So for these beverage shops, instead of using concrete or commonly used plywood or fiberboard, because during the renovation, it will involve a lot of hacking and waste of materials. I designed a counter that a combination of metal frame and a timber box at the bottom, so that the whole counters are not mounted to the shops, and they can be taken out for repair, upgrades, repaint, and any works that requires for every few years. And the weight of carrying the counters will be much lesser because the metal frame and the cabinets for drawers and compartments are separated into two elements. This is the details of the counter. And especially what I understand most is during the pandemic, some of the shops has to move from shopping malls to some old shop houses in Georgetown. And all the counters that have been designed earlier, when during the relocation, they have been easily transported and recycled back to the new premise. And because the earlier design of the counters in consistent width, they could be joined up to become a long counters. So the counters eventually find a new place without having to be cut away. Thank you. That's all for my sharing.
Thank you, Architect Chen. I'm sure a lot of us can appreciate what you have been using, right? The using of the existing context, using it as serving as a background to your projects, right? And the usage and it's seamlessly integrating into your design, right? I think a lot of us can appreciate what you've been trying to do. So thank you again for your sharing session. All right, guys. So for now, we'll have a short bio break for 5 minutes. So for those of you who just finished your cup of coffee, you can go fill it back up and go to the toilet when you need to, and we'll be back in a short 5 minutes. So for those of you who have questions, we'll get to all your questions right after we finish our second speaker. All right, guys. So we'll meet back with you guys in about 5 minutes. Okay, see you guys back soon. Bye, guys. All right, hi, guys. Hopefully your coffee cups are filled up, or tea, whichever one you prefer, right? So next on our list is Architect Edric Choo. So Architect Edric Choo, I think he's bachelor's from as well as here locally, USM as well, for those of you, so alumni, for those of you. All right, so he's traveled around the world, getting his experiences from Asia, China, Japan, India, you name it, I think he's been there, right? And he's also worked in a lot of firms throughout Malaysia, locally, as well as Singapore. He's been with PR Hamzah & Young, ZLG Senior Berhad, RTNQ, W Architects, SCDA Waha, right? So I believe he's also been helping educate the younger graduates, right? Those who are younger, sharing his ideas. So next, he'll be sharing his ideas with us. So I'll pass the ball to you. I'll get the direction.
Thank you, Effendi. First of all, thank you, PAM Northern Chapter, for inviting for my speech. Let me share the screen. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opening speech. And thank you also for the sponsor, GCP. Okay, let me start. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Today, I would like to share some thought and design process for my company, which is CHOO POO LIANG Architect and also Auto Design Atelier. The company was formed during 2015. Then we believe our works is not restricted by specific style, but it's more responding to the nature of the project, the site context, the local culture, formal architecture language, and we also believe that climate change is a very important issue. So most of the projects we didn't preconceive when we have a design. Basically, it's an in-depth design process rather than perceived of end result. So it's purely involved listening to our client and understand the needs, their aspirations, the products by spoke. Let me share a few projects that we have done. Actually, we have throughout the years we have done quite a number of projects, and we have actually participated in quite a number of competition and award as well. First project we'd like to share is my private residence. It's actually a courtyard house at Sungai Buloh. The house have been finalists for World Architecture Festival 2017, and also we have been published in Arch Daily before. So for the brief is very simple. It's actually affordable home with nature. The site is actually a housing neighborhood. So basically, it's an intermediate lot of the project of the terrace house renovations. So we look into the spaces like a functionality, sequential, essential, and also relationship. The nature, like for example, light, shadow, ventilation, and greenery, and basically the history and the culture as well. As everyone can see, this is a typical housing, terrace housing that we can see when it's after newly built, which is very organized and systematic. Basically, it's very monotonous, but after a certain time, the whole entire residentials have been their own identity. The owners start to have their own creations, and which is in some extent is very chaotic. In some extent there is some character into that is being played into it. So as we know, if it's terrace housing, most of the intermediate unit is always dependence on the artificial light, because the unit is very long and deep in order to maximize the density of the housing unit, which result of the shorter frontage and longer deep inside in the typical terrace house. So on the picture on the right hand side, you can see this is the typical normally people who do the renovations for the terrace house, where most of the time you are actually relying on the artificial lighting, and also mostly people will put on the air conditioning in order to because of the weather outside is very hot and humid. So very simple. I think everyone noticed about this. I think Architect Cheng has actually talked about shop houses, which is appear in the Southeast Asia, and the logic of the shop houses is a very common sense thing because it's long and deep. The idea of courtyards where they bring in the natural light and also ventilation to the center of the house to give a natural setting where you require a breathing space, and there is a space, a center of the space where people will actually occupy and actually interact as well. So having that inspirations of the idea, what we do for this house is actually the client would like to sleep to have a home which is near to the nature. So instead of houses that fill with cars in the front, we advise the client that we only have one car that is actually occupy the space, and the rest, both sides is actually filled with nature. It's also bringing the nature to the house until the center part of the courtyard, where the center part of the courtyard you're lit up as also the center activity space for the house. Apart from creating, as you can see, this is original plan of the house, where it's shorter, right? And then after that, we will maximize up to the setback line, and then towards the end as well. And approaching the house based on the sequential spaces, where you enter, because it's a culture, it's a Chinese culture, where you can see the first thing is the altar spaces. And when you venture to, you will see the living and the dining, where you have an open plan up to the kitchen area. By doing that, you actually allow for cross ventilations throughout the house without any blockage of in between. As you can see, this is a typical old plan, which is hardly to have a cross ventilation happen. As for the upper floor, when you're coming out from the stair, you can experience a high volume of the so-called dining spaces. Apart from creating a courtyard where it's only bring in the light and nature, we also are creating a volume of space which allow people to enjoy sequences of spaces inside the house. As this is master bedroom, which is extended, and the relationship between the master bedroom and also the toilet is an open plan without any barrier. And then we allow for a sliding door, a sliding full height glass door, and also sliding window on this pool side here. So when it's during a good season that time, you can actually allow for cool air and also the cross ventilations towards the house. As you can see, this is a wind diagram that we can actually anticipate how the wind flow throughout the house. As you can, of course, during the good time, morning and evening time is a time where you can open the window and allow for cross ventilations. And in some extent, in the evening time or in the afternoon time, the hot air on outside is the air on outside is always hot, which is actually allowed the owner to actually close the window and also enjoy a more controlled temperature in the house, inside the house. As the ground floor is perfectly designed with the open plan, where the living and dining is spread across to the kitchen, where there's a certain small barrier of separations by decorations of the fish tank. And this is all built-in cabinetry. And at the kitchen area, you have an island counter where you can actually sit and view towards the garden as well. As can see from this illustration, that you can see that's how the wind cross ventilation is happening throughout the house. When we have a courtyard here, we also allow the hot air to go out, and by doing this, we'll allow the hot the hot air will go out on this side on the top, with actually the cross ventilation from the front towards the end. This is the changes from the front facade. As mentioned, the client is a nature lover. This is initials of the planning where the tree haven't grown, even though he have a rooftop garden where he actually would like to enjoy the greenery, the relationship between the front and the roof terrace spaces. The most important, my experience of working inside a terrace house renovations in the intermediate unit is because the idea of the terrace house is always the size, typical size of terrace house is 22 by 75. That is a standard size. But how to make the terrace house make spacious and also feel like a bungalow, so-called a more spacious look to the house, where this cleverest play of the space is very important, where you can actually maximize the spaces by furniture arrangement and also the floor plan that make you feel the house is actually larger than what is being expected. Without a properly planned layout, will result of the terrace house intermediate very clustered and also very small. As you can see, the whole house is actually finished off with very simple cement rendering. We usually render the floor, we render the wall, and also initially the ceiling is also been rendered, but actually, but there's a limitation. That's why we decided to go for plasterboard on this side. We create the space where it allows the natural light to coming in, and also break the barrier between the relationship between outside and inside. and between the lower floor and the upper floor. Apart from that, the spaces of the double volume is not only usage as to bring in the light and also putting in the nature, but it's also experience from the user. Open plan kitchen, simple material, minimalist, but yet raw to represent the simplicity and also the rusticness that we want to achieve. So instead of putting a very refined material, the client want to go for a very cost-effective material. So what I actually advise the client to remove all the way the existing floor tiles that provide by developer, and actually just use a cement render and continuous up to the kitchen counter and also the wall. Simple leading up the staircase with a simple railing, U-channel. We'll continue with the LED light. Furniture arrangement, mixture between the new and the old. Recycled wood have been also one of the display as a backdrop to the art piece to the house. As you can see, the relationship between the bedroom and the open plan toilet is well accentuated. So basically, you can feel that how the ventilations and the wind flow and the conventional way of doing houses with full of walls is actually eliminated. How to use a simple material and yet to convert it into more poetic spaces and a more artistic look. That's what we're trying to achieve. In the bathroom, most people will try to use the most expensive tiles and or luxurious material, but how to achieve it with a simple material and yet to turn out to be elegant look, that is a challenging that we want to do. Viewing from the top, experience the nature courtyard in the middle, and also cross relationship between the room and room. We allow a smaller room of the terrace houses to extend the view towards outside, that actually break up the limitations of the claustrophobic of the smaller space. The kids allowed to interact with the parents below and enjoying the nature and having fun of communication to the house. Experience of the spaces and counting the night coming into the nature, watching the nature is like enjoying the poetic of how the light and the greenery are communicating each other. Finally, this is how the family enjoying the space in the middle of the house, where they spend most of the time in the dining table. Okay, a second project that I would like to share is actually a private bungalow. We've done quite a lot of private bungalow, but I decided to choose this one to share, which is under construction now. The brief of the project is very simple. It's a home for with nature as well. Site is actually a surrounding neighborhood where we have one very attractive visual towards the nature on the right hand side. This is where we rotated the living spaces directly view towards the nature on the particular neighborhood. Space functional, sequential, and substantial expansion, light ventilations and greenery, fragmentations, unit to hold, simplicity and immaterial. This is the idea that we explore throughout the project. How the project is been laid out is actually the client is a couple with a single baby dog. They would like their life to be circulated around with a healthy exercise on the ground floor area. That's why they have this open air yoga. The whole house is actually elevated. Only certain spaces is actually elevated, allocated at the ground floor, where you have a study room, a classroom, and the whole house is actually designed to circulate around the central courtyard area. And this center courtyard area will be spin off with the full of planting on this perimeter area. Lap pool, the client is exercise. As mentioned, they are very important in their health, concern about their health. a lap pool with a pink color, which is there's always a client dream to have a pink pool, pink color pool. Parking at the car, walking through the small tunnel, leading to a tiny space and arriving at the big center court. Walking through the staircase or arriving at the open space near to the nature. A continued journey to the dining area where they enjoy their daily daily meal, or they can actually walk up the staircase and leading to the living space where it's actually oriented to face towards the forest on this side. The whole house is actually designed with a fragmented of small spaces that allow a cross ventilation in between the rooms, and then it leading out by a corridor spaces that actually have a view towards a big courtyard at the center. As for form and also shape explorations, we have tried out. We have explored different range of design throughout the process of designing with the client, and we managed to convince the client and also proceed ahead with this shape, so-called directional shape design, where it's actually shaped according to environmental, where a certain shading is actually required for the big window that allow the view and also cross ventilations. At the top area, the fragmented of the bricks surface that allow the hot air to go out and also avoid the water coming in. The house is looked quite in the way is shapings monotonously without any others material. That's why I highlight on the idea of what John have been mentioned, the idea of immaterial. Entering the house, where is a series of cubic spaces, is actually circulate around the center courtyard, and this is where the main spaces, which is highlighted as the main feature of the entrance, is facing towards the mountains on this side. You're walking, once you park your car, you're walking through this rustic concrete surface, arriving at the center courtyard where you have an infinity pool flowing towards the garden. At the top of the infinity pool, the client can actually enjoy the daily life of their routine, where they can the couple can actually have a resting at the center part of the courts. The couples, Miss Jing, is a yoga practitioner, so she liked her space to be circulate around the nature, where we have a center sitting area where they can gather around with the friends and enjoying the scenery circulate by the nature. Center courts, relationship between the living and the dining spaces and walking across the corridor spaces. Living spaces, which is four-sided open, no weird with the cross ventilations and also natural lighting, but how we play with the spaces monotonously without exploring too much on material, but all on seamless surface. Same with the bathroom and also the master bathroom and also the toilet showering area. It's all floor, it's a seamless from the floor coming out, leading directly to the wardrobe, spiral staircase going up with a 2-story wardrobe, open plan for the dining room above and with the kitchen. This is the overall view towards the entire project. Okay, the third project, would like to share a bit on the public project that we have worked on. It's actually just completed public residence garrisons at Puchong. We have gotten numerous awards. It's actually submitted by a developer. The Asia Pacific Property Award. The brief is very simple. The site have actually is actually further in from from the main road and have been abandoned for 2 years after the DP submissions, and has none of the unit been sold. We have been invited from the developer to revitalize the project to make sure that after we can put in the design, because the site is actually very far in towards the Kampong neighborhood. So as a location wise for housing is definitely not a desirable location. So a developer have to use design to make sure that the house is fully sold. So after we take over, we redesign and it's fully sold. Housing, what we target on this housing project is actually to look at how Malaysians' housing dilemma, the housing dilemma of the repetitive of the housing, monotonous, and also I will call it a voluntary prisoner. Why we call it a voluntary prisoner, later I'll explain. In terms of typology, we go for a courtyard house, natural lighting, cross ventilation, greenery, rainwater harvesting, genius loci, a rooftop view towards a village area. Housing is only 12 units, basically entering from the side, main road. This is existing housing area, which is further in. At the back towards here is all neighborhood of the village, where it's not complete, not desirable, where people want to stay in. So the house is been designed as an island site. This is the entrance towards the house, where the unit, because of the sloping side, this side is actually further lower, and this side is actually higher. And we actually allowed the double frontage of the unit. If you look at the unit, on the ground floor, that's where you can park your car. And by screening off the car from the living spaces, this is where you enter through the garden spaces. When you enter through the foyer, journey to the big door, leading to the living spaces and staying next to the garden, and sandwiched by another garden in the middle. Dining space is in the middle, relationship with the living spaces. Open plan to the dry kitchen and also the dry kitchen towards the end. And we provide 1 bedroom for the elderly. When you're going down to the lower floor, you have another mixed room or so-called a service area where you can have a bedroom of 5, and also open out to the terrace at the behind the unit. If the owner want to park, have more cars to park, they can actually drive down to and convert this part as a car park spaces. The house have been designed with as the same ideology that we derive from the courtyard house, where the developer approached us because of the attract with the renovations that we have done, which is bring in the natural lighting, cross ventilations from the front towards the end. And this is very important, especially for the terrace houses typology, because most of your chances to cross ventilation is only at the front and the back, and also a possibility at the center. So the master bedroom, which is sandwiched between the 2 garden spaces, which is allowed the cross ventilations and the relationship between the view from the front towards the end, relationship between the bedrooms to the bedrooms, and also the views towards the rear as well. And the nice part about this project, we actually convinced the client to have roof terraces that they can actually enjoy the scenery towards a village setting. Of course, the developer as a buyer, people will not attract too much on the village, but unfortunately, there's a lake next to the village. So the selling point is the view towards the lake, but at the same time, is architecturally, it also creates a relationship where you can enjoy the beauty of the village at the rear side of the site. Cross ventilations from the front to the end. As we mentioned just now, what we call a voluntary prisoner. I always think that it's a Southeast Asia housing. We always equip ourselves with a series of grill and also lock set, where once we enter the terrace house, the first thing we will do is put up the grill and also equip ourselves with the padlock. In order to control differentiations of individuality of alterations that going to be done by individual owner that will create a different variety to alter the design. We actually put this so-called recent Malaysia context into a picture where we can actually convince the client to create a series of screen planter and also a barrier where we can put up the screen to avoid the burglar from coming in. At the same time, it's also help to beautify the house. So the lowest is actually design part of the house overall setting. Cross ventilation from the front until the back without fearing to the from the unit. Especially we allow a hot air to go out on this part here, where the unit on the top can actually view down to the unit below. While they will also allow a natural light towards the center of the courts. As mentioned, we required by authority and also how we convince the developer as well to create this kind of rainwater harvesting to the surface of the front of the unit. Then when you can recycle the harvesting to water for the car cleaning and also the front yard cleaning. The overall look of the house, this is completed. Instead of create a series of monotonous housing area, we create a series of multiple so-called AB. So they have a unit which is lower with a more frontage and then higher with the further in. Create the template which is a contrast in between, and also relationship between the lowest of the screen here and also the lowest and the gate. This part is actually a series of vertical lowest relationship to the gate, and also allow for sliding doors that they can actually open. As for this one, is actually perforated screen that you can actually operate to view up to your neighborhood if you need it, or if you require privacy, you can always screen it off. And you can see this part is actually operable. You can screen it off and also open. This is overall view from the front, and this is overall view from the back. The back is actually, the front is actually 2-story look, and the back is actually 3-story look. This is where we put the gravel in, and developer would like to let the owner to occupy on the back. Okay, as you can see, the screen has been thought of as part of the design instead of allow the so-called the tenant to coming in. That's the first thing they will do, putting out the grill. Living next to the greenery, this is the living spaces that we allow a so-called a vertical planter, and the planter is also act as a barrier where to avoid of people of jumping into the house. Center court of the house, the double volume spaces, and also natural light bringing into the center space, and extending the individual room space from the inside out. Linking with the bridges with the minimums of the vertical louvers, spiral staircase catching up for people bringing up to the rooftop garden. Precast staircase leading up to the first floor. This is part where the idea of the ventilations, when the hot air is rising, they allow to open and allow for hot air to go out. As this is the corner unit. Okay, the fourth project, I still have some time, right? Do I still have some time?
Yes,
okay.
Of course.
Okay, yeah, okay. The fourth project we'd like to share is actually the Central Works that we recently completed. Central Works is at the Central West. The project is actually a restorations project. The brief is giving a new life to the existing old wall. The area is actually office space for the train yard area. Genius loci of the space of the site. Important of urban growing in the city. Conversation between the new and the old. Relationship with the surrounding. Material, wabi-sabi, beauty of interaction. Geometry, the content paneling grid line in relationship to the existing building. So this is the Central Works. It's actually at the near the Jalan Ipoh there, if everyone have been there before. Sentul MRT station. This is Sentul Depot. This is a Sentul Sales Gallery. Basically, this is the entire area is actually owned by YTL. As you can see, this is urban ruin in the city. Before the client decided to restore this particular area, you can see the entire office spaces for the HQ, for the train yard area is actually become a ruin, left with a so-called historical wall, so-called party wall. And this British late 9-inch wall, which is result of what we inspire from this project, how do we relationship between the old and the new. The existing space has been a place where people take photograph, especially the wedding photograph. As a site, a center space of the area, where you can see that the relationship visual link to the Penang, Sentul Depot, visual link to the forest, and also sales gallery. This is how the plan of the project. Basically, the existing wall is actually consists of 2 layers. Actually, there's another layer which at the middle to enforce the so-called the party wall, or so-called the diaphragm wall. But the structure have engineer actually advises we can actually remove the particular center space that we insert into the new space. Driving in, drop off at the center of the entrance, coming through the central atrium spaces, you leading to the open plan on the left and right hand side. Require by the authority, I mean the fire department, to have a 2 staircase. There's another entrance which is from the for the workers coming from the back. All the toilet spaces is actually located one side. This is a service serve area, and lift core with the main staircase, and this is actually a service staircase. Going up, we restore the space. We keep the central atrium. We inserting a new box into the central atrium to give a glimpse to what is going to happen to the upper floor. What we insert on the upper floor is first floor. This is the first floor. Sorry, this is the ground floor, and this is the first floor. And then we insert in the mezzanine floor, where we occupy the spaces on the first floor, where the ground floor and the first floor, they have a 5.9 meter height volume spaces. Going up to the second and the third floor is where the new structure is being introduced. As you can see, this H column is all implant in to insert in using a micro pile without affecting the existing structure and without actually depending on the existing structure. The new structure is sitting by itself, foundations. The meeting point between the old and the new is just a meet with the movement joint without any interdependence. Restorations to the bottom part of the original look of the they call it office building. It's actually a castle look structure, where how the new structure has been inserted into this old structure. The scale of the new structure or new insertions of architecture is further set back into respect of the existing old one, to give a sense of scale that the old one is actually far bigger than the smaller one on the top. How we create a relationship, the new and the old, and yet we want to speak out our language. At the same time, we want to respect to you. We understand the column width, the permutations of the content panel, the column grid of the existing structure, the I column from the ground. We identify the grid from the window bay and also the so-called repetitions and also the order from the past. We insert in the 9-inch bridge, brick, also called the British late brick pattern to the facade, and that is where we result of the complex geometry of the facade, where we derive of the content panel sizing. As you can see, this is the old restorations of the project. The new restoration to the project. This old existing building, the entrance to the office spaces. And that is where the beauty of the content panel, so-called the new building, is inserted and sitting on the top of the existing building. As mentioned, this project, because we are working with the developer, so there is also a certain limitations that we can able to explore, because ultimately there is also a fine line between a rustic look that is affordable, can accept by the public, and also so-called the rustic look that can be accepted by the artist. So the paneling of the content, the idea of the content is to create the relationship between the rustic, the new rustic, and the old rustic brick surface. This is a real entrance where we have a step going up to the entrance, splitting the block into two, and where this is where you can see there's a lot of pop-up window, and this pop-up window is actually a view from the third floor that create relationship to all the spaces and also the projects by YTL. Inside the atrium spaces is nicely and poshly done as envisioned by the client, and also rather than complete a ruined look or feel, like what SAO have been explored, because there's also, because it's involved a public project, so the rustic look and also the artist look, there is a certain limitation that we can actually explore or refine to the acceptance of the public. Rustic look, how we actually create the relationship between the old and the new. The new structure has been inserted in freestanding with the open deck platform. The decision to apply to have open services in relation to the open exposed brick surface as a communications relationship between the link bridge, how we actually termination between the detail of the railing and the glass by the big span with the thin surface, how the ceiling is actually terminated with the O. There's a lot of site coordinations and also site decisions that need to be made because of this restoration project. How the edge between, how the meet between the new and the old, as you can see, we still maintain the rustic look of the brick, and how the new project is being inserted in, where the new elevated mezzanine floor is actually hung from the top of the structure, which relationship with the relationship with the space below. This is the second floor where you can enjoy the roof terrace on the on this side here. How the window is recreated, the opening that is actually created based on the grid pattern that to allow a visual towards the outside space of the greenery outside. Staircase and also the brick. This is all the new brick. The leaf core is actually actually formed by a series of new brick. This is a British lay where the joint, the pointing line is actually protruded. The workers have to do one by one and also lay brick one by one with the selected brick, and they actually spend around 3 to 4 months just to complete 3-story leaf core wall. And this staircase is spanning from one end to the other end without having a stringer at the bottom. The railing is actually a stringer where you have a folding plate folding railing to conceal the light, at the same time strengthen the balustrade. This is a view from the top where you can see how we define the certain brick between the new and the old. The new one actually is like floating above the old, and yet they are communicating well among each other. The window is actually a pop-up balcony that allow people to view out to the greenery to the surrounding at night scene. Another project which I like to share is mostly is competitions. This one is a competition that we won in the 2017 first prize in the international competition. And when we also at the same time, we got the World Architecture Festival Award and also Architecture Review Future Award. The site is actually neighborhood of the site is actually at the soil area. I think something wrong with that side. Sorry about that. Okay, let's start with this one. The site is actually at the area called Soy at Kenya. The area is when the owner, which is the architect firm, he's a founder for One Heart Foundation charity center that have a charity center throughout the entire world. They organize an international competition to look for funding to fund for this eco village project. The eco village is actually consists of primary and secondary school and also orphanage center for children in Kenya. The site is actually further in from the town, where the limitations of the site, is you can't get the you want to get the material, you have to drive around 2 to 3 hours to the center of the town. So how we want to target to go ahead with this project is actually the advantages that we thought of, like using the existing sustainable material, which we know that is actually bamboo. By looking at the existing Aboriginal form of the building, where they have a series of circular building where it circulates around the barrier. This is a Maasai housing estate in Kenya. How we create the double layer roof and also a mud building where the mud brick is actually created by the local community and also shaded by the thatch roof on the top, and actually is self-supported by the bamboo structure. And the whole structure is actually circular on the center courtyard. As I mentioned, as you know, that it's also inspired by architecture of Kerry, which is have a center big tree which is shaded towards the entire area. This is how we plan the structure. From the existing site, we actually allowed for a series of zoning where we separate between the public and the private. The private part is where the orphanage area. The semi-public area is where the community come and actually serve to the children. And the private part is where the community will arrive here to actually serving the surrounding. Entrance, which is leading to the orphanage towards the end, and also the school at the front area. How the entire planning is actually circulate is a series of classrooms. This is a primary school, and this is a secondary school. Is actually circulate around the center courtyard, and center courtyard is where the children actually come up with the interact to have the informal learning, rather than when they have the formal learning at the center of the space. Relationship between the courtyard and the courtyard is where the interaction between the different age of the school, which it allowed them to run around in between spaces until the reach of the orphanage center towards the end. Overall is series of thatch roof, which is created to shade to the small little room below. As we know that this particular area, the weather is very cold at the night and is very, very hot in the daytime. We have create this form, self-sustaining farm, which is the farm, which is allowed the fish, water, and the farm is interrelationship, and is also is actually occupied by the community. Surrounding barrier is actually planted with bamboo. So if any structure that they need to replace, they can actually use this bamboo to harvest the bamboo and recycle the material that is been using for the entire project. As you can see, this is how we identify environmentally. Hot air is rising on the top, and then cool air is flowing from the center, from the window. small spaces, series of capsule, small spaces that allow the cross ventilations, a room being partitioned with the internal color, and allow the hot air to go up, and have another double layer roof which is covered with the thatch. Children have been, center court have been the life of the children. After school, they can come up here and play with the big canopy of the trees. And we even study up to the material where for the school, we actually using the handmade clay brick, and also for the orphanage center, we actually using the handmade concrete. The reason why we use two material is because the weather changes in the night. Concrete, we know that is actually absorbing the heat in the daytime and reducing the heat, releasing the heat at night. So that's why at night time it's very cold. That's why we use a concrete in order to warm up the building and for the orphanage at night. Idea of a circular room where it's more concentrated towards the center rather than a square room size. Idea of the we study of the original Maasai, where they like to sit around the center ring where they can actually read along from the teacher to the children, and then we have elevated spaces where the children can actually run around village to between rooms and rooms. This is where the children can hide and play. And this the view towards the courtyard at the center. And this is where the fish farm and also the farming that is actually occupied by the local community. This is overall view towards this eco village. It's basically a self-sustaining village without relying on exterior material, and also relying on the relationship between the community. So I have two more to present, if you don't mind, Wendy.
I think we can spare a few minutes. Project looks very interesting.
Okay, like to go through another one is very much related to Penang. The brief is actually a competition in the renewals Penang Bay competition. We shortlisted. The idea is actually, if you look carefully, even though we didn't win, but I would like to share out the idea. We actually identify the Penang in a very thorough way. How we identify the Penang in the landscape of the landmark, existing land use and zoning, future development, Penang flood hotspots, and also the future city for Penang. We analyze the issue, deteriorations of the spirit of the street, impact of landfill to the bay, uncertainty fate of the local, affordable housing shortage, diminishing the mangrove, and also not walkable city. What we propose is actually Penang famous of 101 Street, where we have a street from spreading from Sri Tanjung up to the end of the mangrove, where the second jetty is. We propose a Penang satellite floating city. I know there is an issue of the Penang landfill, but we call it a floating city because it's a city that's sitting on the stilt, which is rather than fill the land, which is sustainably is more advanced. The reason why we propose a floating city in the middle of the two islands is because to link up the break between the two islands. And also the reason why we propose a future city because we want to maintain the cultural look of the Penang. And we analyze empowerment and expand the local communities. Instead of building out without concerning of what local communities, we study, like for example, this is a jetty clang, where they have existing activities that actually can attract a lot of users and also tourists. We encourage them to expand more and more. Provision more affordable housing. We have housing that we call it a folly that actually spreading out towards the Penang Bay. And we know deteriorations of because of the at the Seberang Pride area where the growing of the factory is actually deteriorations of the mangrove. And mangrove is actually very important as a barrier for the environmental. So we actually introduce a mangrove tourism in these particular spaces. And lastly, we introduce a walkable Penang Street 101. If we we study about the local culture of Penang. We're stitching all together. We're vulnerable community, living religious feast, urban food scenery, living handcraft, dying handcraft, and everything. This is all Penang culture that we stitch it all together, become a 101 street that we introduce. We even concerned about sustainable key feature throughout the entire development. As the entire master plan, this is a city area where we propose that actually can relationship between the two island and the mainland. This is a island which is sitting on the still where there is inspired by the Sentosa Island in Penang, where the recreation area will be happen. And this is place where all the future city growth, where the ports and is coming towards here. They can actually new development, and the tower is actually can be happen here, rather than a Comta, which is a high rise in between the low setting of the fabric. Because we understand that in Penang, is already maximum growth of the housing and also the shop houses. So that's why the urban fabric is there's no space to grow unless you actually demolish the old and rebuild a new one. So instead of building the new one, why can't we build on the floating island and remain the existing typology of the old shop houses here? We even introduced a city council, or so-called new administrative, as a bridge building, where the center space of the office building for the new government actually relationship between the new and between Penang Island and the Pride. This is the how we looking about the streets. Spreading from Sri Tanjung up to the end, towards the end of the near to the mangrove area at the second bridge. The first one is we call it a dragon boat piers, where we have a dragon boat streets. The second one we call it is a Usain Street, where a series of cuisine will be Penang cuisine will be actually spreading across in this particular area where the existing is already happened here. This is where the Gurney Drive. We're expanding the existing typology and also the culture that is already existing. So exit in the particular place. And what we do is we stitch out all together and we create this infinity of the shop houses and also the community street that people can walk from the one end to the end and circulate around the Penang Bay. We have a Peranakan Street on the third, and we have this Trishaw Street on the fourth. On the fifth, where you know the particular area close to the Zeti, there's a lot of Trishaw, which is also become a culture to the Penang. And then we also have a textile street. We know this part is old jetty, and where the cruise ship is actually landing. And this is actually the old factory for the textile area. 7 is we introduce a ferry art street. This is old ferry that we actually flipped the other way to create the art for the local artists to explore themselves. And then we call it Transition Street on the number 8, where this is a place where the new hub of the ferry terminal. Okay. We continue. This is existing jetty, where you can see that it's full of the jetty culture, and that we actually encourage and expand it. Number 10, number 9 is this part here. Number 10 is actually a temple street. There is a series of temples that are happening on this side, which actually extending the culture up to the end, where we have a hawker street, fish shop, and warung street on this side, and then we have fishing street on this 15, which is somewhere sorry. Yeah, and then towards the end is actually the mangrove growing area. Because we understand that this part is actually full of the seagrass, and that is where the particular of the seagrass can be actually become ecotourism particular area. This on towards the other side of the Penang. This is where we produce mangrove, where we actually encourage ecotourism with the mangrove trail. This is how we envision the city. And we know that this part here is actually old fort area that we can actually link up all together with a series of elevated walk above the city. We expand the mangrove, the jetty, towards as a fish farming for the local clan, and the kelong can be actually expand and also become a ecotourism. the extent of the street and also the shop houses, the continuous shop houses from one end to the other end. People can walk from the one end to the other end. This is the PPR, low-cost housing that happened in Penang. We expand and giving a community to them. Last but not least is we call it a city of tomorrow. It's actually a future thought that we have that have been published in Design Boom publication on November 2020, and also SGM World Science. And also we've been listed as a top 10 submission of visualizations for the future. What we call is, why we come up with this idea is because of the pandemic. And we know that one of the reasons why pandemic is happening is also because the Mother Earth is sick. And we set the ground free, and we elevated the tower above the ground. We create a self-sustaining city, integration, transportation, living and work in one, plug in and plug out building and transportation integrated, connected city with the city with the flying capsule. It's a future thought that we have. The idea of this future thought is actually coming from the competition that we enter for the city of tomorrow. Instead of, if we know that human is being occupying the land with cars and roads and car parks and also buildings, simply map that we taken from the KL itself by connecting the road and also the car park spaces and also utility spaces that we use, we should easily take 45% of the entire land. And imagine that if we can create this route from one road to get, and you can see that the size of the highway and the daily life when we, especially staying in KL and slowly growing in Penang, where you wake up from your house, the first thing you see is the queuing from the car to the office. And when you go back home, that time you also queuing from the car to go back home. Imagine that the landscape is start taking over the city. And the idea of the flying car and also the flying vehicle is connected. And our idea is combined between the building and the flying car combined together to create a flying capsule, where we create the bridge between the home, work, mobility, and life together. And our idea is actually to create in future. The building is no more just a particular office spaces or tower. The tower itself is actually self-sustaining tower, which is all the activity is happen here. The living, office, equipment, and also work life and leisure is all happen within the city in this tower itself. The tower is actually self-elevated and freeing from the ground and giving back the nature back to the Mother Earth. All the city is actually connected one by one, and apparently the city of each building of this building, so-called a facade or so-called the building, is actually consists of a series of flying capsule that that is plug in, plug out from the city. So we envision that this is a flying fleet that we can actually detach and also combine between the different kind of spaces, where you can combine between the live life and work together, and also can combine as a working restaurant. And this flying fleet is actually will be the facade of the particular building. So instead of building for more, we are building for less, because the structure now is only, the building now is only consists of structure, and is only plugged in and plugged out by this flying fleet to form a building facade. As you can see, this is where what we envision is the future city is no more a tower that is separate by a commercial tower, residential tower, or a leisure tower, but it's actually a tower that actually consists among each other. People can travel vertically within all the daily needs and also basic needs within the tower itself. If they need to fly to another city or fly to another tower, they will just use this flying feet. And the original tower is just consists of the structure, and the facade is actually plugged in and plugged out by the capsule. As you can see, this is the phase 1 where we built the empty structure shell. The phase 2 where the capsule start to plug in, and that is where the structure is start to plug in and plug out from the facade. As we know, by going back the city back to the nature, when you got to go to the forest, you no need to go to other place where you can just come down from your tower and you just go into the wow. And the building is free elevated above the ground and transport from the clean energy from one place to the next place. Here's how we envision the structure. And you can actually decentralize the city, where one city is actually forming on one group and the next city is forming from the group. They were flying from one city to the next city, and by leaving the mother nature open back to the original. The rest is only our award and recognitions, and also the competition that we have won, publication. And thank you. This is our team, consists of 12 people, and you can know more by visiting our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edric. I'm sure all of us were very interested in particular about the large project you were talking about, right? I think when I was a kid, we always watched, I don't know if you remember the Jetsons, right? Where everyone was staying in like elevated areas inside the clouds. I think it reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I think we can continue on next with the Q&A sessions. I see that we already have a few questions, so we'll get right into it. We'll get to the first question. I think this applies to both of our panelists, Architect Edric as well as Architect Cheng, right? One of the panelists asks, how do you actually convince your owners or the clients, right, for a small scale project that you are paid to design and resolve your issues, right, instead of just following their direction? I think their main concern is, how do you communicate your ideas so that the clients are willing and able to, do what you want to do? Let's go with architecture. Do you have any advice for our younger graduates?
Sorry.
Architecture?
Okay, I'll go first.
Yeah.
I think it's starting from, I think, the selection of clients. Glenn Method has say something really nice once. He said, your current client is the determination of your next project. So the selection of clients is very important. So you can spend more time to communicate, and during the process of when you want to accept a new commission, if you can, then that is very important. Then you have the right people to work along with. But of course, to have that ability to select clients, in return, you need to produce a body of works that could convince and also shows the ability of you solving a certain problems and also the skill. Then it works both ways, to my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you. How about you, Architect Edric? What's your opinion on the matter?
The question is calling the how we convince the client to our design, is it?
Yeah.
This is art of selling, right? You just need to enter the marketing school. I think as an architect, in some extent, you also need to convince the client in the way that I think typical, mostly, the client, there's different client come from different background. We have been dealing with private client, and we also been dealing with the developer, and we also been dealing with the government as well. Different client always have a different background of how you need to communicate with them. Private client, most of the time, I think, as A.R. Cheng was mentioning, they appreciate your work and they like your work. That's why they come to you. In some extent, your convincing power, you have some advantage on that. They will listen to you, Mr. Cheng. And then after that, for developer clients, in some, I think most you have to, when you're dealing with public project, apart from a developer interest, you also have to look into a public interest, where because a public, they may not, when we do, because as an architect, we also play with professionalism, it's a play into a part. like the public project that we do, the public housing, there's a certain limitation that we need to control ourselves without exploring too much. The reason is because of where we're dealing with purchaser complaint and also purchaser feedback in terms of contractually and also in terms of safety and also regulations. So in some extent, as much as you want to play as an artistic role, there's also limitations in terms of professionalism. I won't call it limitations. I will say the professionalism that you need to look into it as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your input, Cedric. So while we're talking about the developer, right, we have one other question as well, right? This is in regards to the row of terrace houses project you mentioned just now, right? So they were asking, how did the developer control the owners from renovating the houses further down the line? How do they keep that in control? Do they have any power in particular?
Well, I think it's happened in the market where you just, some developer, they do it as a strata title. Once you do it as a strata title, the facade is actually very much in control. There's a certain limitations they have to set for the buyer to follow the certain rules in order to control the development overall look. However, there's also everything there's come with pro and con. Sometimes with the variety of differentiation in the public house, in the so-called community housing, it do create a sense of so-called character that happen to the particular area. That if it's not so-called too much of standardizations that happen to everywhere in the whole world. And down the road towards a certain time, that is where the city grow, where you can see the kiosks in the city. That's how I see it. Yeah.
I see. Thank you. Okay, next, let's go back to architecture. We have one more question. The questioner was asking, okay, they can see a strong design language throughout the project that you shared, right? Either through the material selected or the color tone selected. It gives an overall sense of peace and calmness throughout. Can you share with us the reason and the consideration or your approach by you when you first visited the site and received the design brief?
I would take the questions in two parts. The first part, Hui was asking about the site visit, and the second part is, sorry, I was missing. The second part is about the question gone already. Effendi, the second part was about.
Yeah, sorry. The second part.
The design brief.
Yes, the design brief.
Okay. Yeah. So the first part on the visiting on site, right? Hui, I normally spend quite a lot of time on site. If I have a chance, sometimes I would even spend overnight at that place because you need to understand the site at different times, the morning, the afternoon, and the night. And at different seasons, if you can also, there are rainy and also when it's very hot and dry. So you need to look at the site like an archaeologist. There are many layers of information contained at the site. You need to look at the meteorological layers, the geographical layers, you know, where the winds come from, whether there's a neighbor that's blocking the wind, and then where the sounds come from, is it a 3-story building next to it? And all these relationship of different factors, they actually link together. So you need to understand the relationship between all these information. And then it relates also on the second part of the question, which is the design brief. So when you have this layer of information on the site and you superimpose together with the design brief, it gives you the holistic pictures of what you need to do and the potential. And I believe in diversities of people. That means there are many needs and way of living. There's not necessarily one way. And I normally for design brief, I also spend a long time with the client to go through what they normally, how, if it's for houses, normally how they they leave the spaces. Some actually spend more time at night, some light. Some of them are actually a morning person. So the way how you design, it not necessarily has to be a big glass opening up to the views. When someone who prefer to be more looking inwards, he doesn't need too much of sunlight. So I think the buildings will evolve in that way, and then also together with the factors that of the site, then you will see the potential.
All right, thank you. So we have one other question as well from Ms. Orr. Okay, the exhibition platform for the metalworks, is the load distribution considered for the placement of the objects, the tools to produce the artworks of the hanging rod and the plywood box throughout?
Sorry, Queen, I'm not sure whether I was too general on the first question. Then if you have anything, you can always ask me at any time. So your second question on the display platform, right? I think
yes,
that's a very good question. The rod is actually going all the way down to the floor. So the rod is actually not hanging. The platform is hanging. So the rod is actually touching the ground. So there's a nut that actually supporting the platform from the floor. And then you're right. There is a calculation on load at the center. So that's why the fuel cylinder wave series, there is also a rod. That's why you see this is the consideration of your design brief. You have a cylinder, and then you have a problem on the side. How do you combine this? So the way of display on the cylinder was combined together with also the rod, and the rod actually penetrates. So the position of the cylinder is also at the center, so that it distributes and the loadings at the center. But if your one tricky thing is because the cylinder are lining up on the one line, so in order for the hand to access the nut at the center is a bit difficult. So if this is the afterthought, I mean, with the time limitations, we didn't have the chance to go into very detail, is to string the platform to be narrower and then longer, but then it go back to the constraint on the side, and then how you're going to design the display on the side, and then your effects also on the Hazen side and all that. And the timber platform is the choice of the thickness of the plywood. So the choice of plywood that you can actually hold them stable enough, but at the same time, it doesn't give too much weight to the platform. So you need to choose carefully. There are different thickness on the plywood. In fact, the most important thing that I think I could improve further, which since you touched on this, is actually the joint of the plywood was the glue. If it's a better joint, then maybe it can be also dismantled easily without having to use the recycle doesn't limit to just the whole box of the plywood. You can actually dismantle the whole parts.
Sorry. Yeah. All right. Thank you. I think I should have answered the question. So we'll go back to Architect Edric. So we have one other question as well. What is your advice to younger architects? Should they practice more on concept, or should they focus more on technical, or do they need to do both? What's your opinion on this?
I would say you need to know all. As an architect, you need to equip with all these things. It's overall knowledge that you need to know. Equip yourself with this knowledge. Conceptual is also very important. That is where your big picture is coming in. Detailing, like Sao In was doing, is also very important. That is where you can execute the building well done and neatly execute at site. As an architect, you are the leading role to the site. If you don't have the technical knowledge, you can't able to get the respect from the contractor. Especially the contractor that have been run their daily life at site, where they have all the maximum of knowledge, and you are the young person that coming in, that you want to sort of instruct him to do certain things that he will probably laugh at you if your knowledge is not enough. So that's very important as well. And also Of course, big picture is also important, and also the idea of the design and the thoughtful, the thinking process. That's where you can actually create something unique for your own design. Yeah.
Right, thank you. So I think we'll take one last question. Okay, this is, I think, I believe goes to architecture. We have one question from the from the chairs, right? Okay, so in regards to your Malacca shop house, right, regarding the introduction of the open courtyard for cross ventilation, they were wondering how did you solve the issue in regards to your water discharge when it was raining, since it was an open courtyard, right? And it's quite relevant to, I think, all the practitioners in Penang.
During the process of opening up the courtyard, right, we start to trace out the point of discharge for the waters. So when doing so, you need to understand the level of your buildings in relation to the drain on the outside. Then you can tell by calculations on the distance of the courtyard from the drain. If you don't have any drain, you need to lay the new one. Then you need to know whether your waters can discharge out. Of course, you can do it by mechanically, but that wouldn't be advisable, because you rely on the pump, and if it fails, then the whole area will be flooded. The other thing is the layer of soil that you have in. Of course, if you have a hard surface, then the running of the waters will be even more challenging. But if you have the layer of soil and the landscape cover that you have on the ground is very important. So if you allow, we also try a method that we punch through a pipe with perforated, so that the waters could penetrate through between the gravels and then to the lower area of the ground faster. So all these efforts you need to test and see on the site. It won't be a standard answer for everywhere. It also subject to the water table level of that particular shop house. Like for Malacca, there are certain row of shop houses, it's very near to the sea, so you cannot go too deep. If you go too deep, you probably, you hit the water table levels. I think same thing happens to Penang too. So in another way is to cut down the waters that going into the roof is through the gutters. But then the next question is where the waters from the gutters, where would you run to? So yeah, it's all interrelated. So yeah.
It's on a case-by-case basis, yes, you would say. Okay, so I think we're almost out of time. Actually, we've exceeded time. So again, I would like to thank Architect Edric and Architect Cheng. So all these other questions, we have a few other questions. We'll try to compile them and we'll try to email it out to our speakers, and hopefully we can circulate them out to all our guests later on. Okay, again,
sure. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, Architect Edric, Architect Cheng, thank you for your time. We at PAM Northern Chapter and throughout the chairman as well, we would like to extend a token of appreciation to our speakers. So we have these magazines, Harvard Design Magazine, issue 48, and the ones here. They will be sent over email to your addresses that you gave us. So you can be expecting from them soon as a token of our appreciation from PAM Northern Chapter and all the organizing committee.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So again, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you everyone, as well as the organizing committee, Architect Daniel, as well as all the panel members, Architect Edric, Architect Cheng, Architect Casey Lau, the chairman, and everyone, thank you for attending. As a reminder, thank you for joining. Please don't forget to sign in and sign up and respond to the questionnaires given, as well as the link. The link should be popping up in your chat box here on the left. Okay. All right, everyone, thank you for attending, and we'll see you guys in the next PAM Design Mini Design Series talk. And thank you again to all our speakers.
Thank you
guys.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you guys.